Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. I never thought I'd find myself in the kind of situation I'm about to share with you. It all started on a quiet evening, one of those nights where the house feels too big and too empty. The rain outside tapped gently on the windows, the kind of sound that makes you want to curl up and forget the world. But instead of peace, that night brought me a choice I wasn't ready to face, one that still makes my heart race whenever I think about it. He stood there in the doorway, a 22-year-old man who I had watched grow up, someone who carried both innocence and a heavy sadness in his eyes. My stepson had been struggling for weeks, though he tried to hide it. He kept his shoulders tense, his smile forced, as if he was carrying the weight of something he couldn't tell anyone else. And that night, he finally broke. With a voice almost trembling, he asked me for something I never expected. "I can't sleep alone tonight," he whispered. "Can I stay with you?" At first, I thought it was just about comfort. Maybe the storm outside had stirred up old fears, or maybe the silence of his room had become unbearable. But the way his eyes lingered on mine told me there was more. There was a kind of vulnerability there that pulled at me, an unspoken plea that went far beyond the words he managed to say. I hesitated. Every part of me knew this was a line I should never cross, but something in my heart wouldn't let me say no. After all, he wasn't a child anymore. He was a grown man, independent in many ways, yet still searching for something he couldn't quite put into words. Was it comfort? Was it love? Or was it something deeper, something neither of us dared to name? As we lay there in the quiet darkness, inches apart, I could hear his breathing steady itself. I could feel the warmth of his presence, the rise and fall of emotions between us that no one else could see. I tried to remind myself of boundaries, of roles, of all the reasons I should have stood my ground. But the truth is, in that moment, I couldn't. Every shift of the blanket, every accidental brush of his hand against mine, carried a weight I didn't know how to handle. My heart beat faster, not just from fear of what might happen, but from the undeniable awareness that something had already changed between us. And as the night stretched on, the space between us seemed to shrink, pulling us toward a choice that could never be undone. But what would you have done in my place? If someone you cared for, someone you thought you understood, suddenly looked at you with eyes that spoke more than words ever could, would you turn away, or would you give in, even for just a moment? The morning after that night felt heavier than usual. The sun peeked through the blinds, but instead of bringing clarity, it only reminded me of everything I was trying to make sense of. I kept replaying the way he looked at me in the dark, the quiet closeness, the unspoken feelings that hovered between us. Nothing physical had happened, but the weight of what almost did was enough to stir something I hadn't felt in a long time. I tried to carry on with the day as if nothing was different. Breakfast was simple, just coffee and toast, but the silence between us spoke louder than any words could. He sat across from me, eyes fixed on his cup, his fingers nervously tapping the table. Every so often he'd glance up, then quickly look away, as if afraid I might catch him. I wanted to ask him what he was thinking, but I couldn't find the right words. Maybe I was scared of hearing the truth. You see, my stepson had always been independent. At 22, he worked hard, carried himself with quiet determination, and rarely asked anyone for help. That's why his sudden need to be close to me felt so unusual, almost out of place. For years, we had lived under the same roof, connected by circumstance more than choice. But now, for the first time, it felt like he was reaching for me, not as a guardian figure, not as someone older he respected, but as something more. As the days passed, I began noticing little changes. He lingered longer in conversations, asking about my day, my thoughts, my feelings, in a way he never used to. Sometimes, when we sat on the couch, our shoulders brushed, and neither of us moved away. Other times, I'd catch him watching me from across the room, his eyes carrying a mix of curiosity and something deeper that he never dared to say aloud. Part of me wanted to believe it was nothing, that I was overthinking, that maybe I was just imagining what I wanted to see. But the more I tried to convince myself, the clearer it became. There was something building between us, slow and steady, like a fire hidden beneath ashes, waiting for the right moment to burn. Still, I couldn't shake the guilt. What would people think if they knew? Would they call it wrong? Would they ever understand how complicated emotions can be, how hearts sometimes cross lines that minds never intended to? I kept reminding myself of the boundaries, but every time I looked at him, every time he smiled faintly or brushed past me, I felt those boundaries slipping away. The real conflict was inside me. I wanted to protect him, to shield him from making choices he might regret later. At the same time, I couldn't deny that I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. His presence stirred a part of me I thought had been buried long ago. And though I never said it out loud, I could feel he sensed it too. One night, when the house was quiet again, I heard him outside my room. His footsteps paused, as if he was debating whether to knock. My heart pounded in the silence. I didn't move, didn't breathe, waiting for what he might do. But after a moment, he walked away, leaving me with a restless ache I couldn't explain. It made me wonder, was he testing me? Or was he struggling with the same emotions I was, fighting the same battle between what felt right and what we both knew could change everything? That unanswered question lingered, heavier than any storm. And the truth is, it was only the beginning. The days that followed felt like walking on a thin rope. Every ordinary moment carried an undercurrent of something unspoken, and every glance seemed to last a little too long. I tried to fill the silence with daily routines, cooking, cleaning, small talk about work and errands, but beneath it all, the real conversation lingered. The one we hadn't dared to have. He started spending more time around me, even when he didn't have to. If I was in the kitchen, he'd find a reason to linger nearby, leaning against the counter, asking questions about simple things like recipes or family stories. If I sat outside to breathe in the evening air, he'd join me, sitting close enough that our arms brushed. None of it was direct, but every little thing felt intentional, almost as if he was waiting for me to acknowledge what was happening. And yet, I kept pulling back. Not out of lack of feeling, but because I knew where this could lead. The tension between what my heart wanted and what my mind warned against was exhausting. Sometimes, late at night, I'd find myself wondering if I was imagining it all. But then the smallest details proved otherwise, the way his voice softened when he spoke to me, the way his eyes followed me across a room, the way he always seemed to find reasons to be near. One evening, while I was folding laundry in the living room, he sat across from me, just watching. After a moment, he said softly, "You always take care of everything. Doesn't it ever get lonely for you?" The question caught me off guard. I looked up, and his eyes were steady, searching for something beyond a simple answer. I wanted to brush it off, but instead I admitted, sometimes it does. That silence after my words stretched thin, filled with meaning we both understood, but couldn't name. He nodded slowly, then leaned back, but I could see the weight of my honesty settling between us. From that moment, it was harder to deny how deeply connected we were becoming. The conflict wasn't just about us, it was about the life we'd built, the expectations of the world outside our walls, the invisible rules we were supposed to follow. I felt torn between protecting him from choices that might complicate his future and admitting that maybe he was old enough to make those choices himself. But love, attraction, and connection don't ask for permission. They grow quietly, like vines that wrap around your heart until you can't ignore them anymore. There was also a growing fear inside me. What if someone else noticed? What if this fragile tension became visible to others? One wrong word, one misplaced gesture, and everything could unravel. I found myself overly cautious in public, careful about how I spoke or looked at him. Yet behind closed doors, the walls seemed to whisper everything we tried to keep hidden. Some nights I lay awake, replaying our small exchanges in my mind. A smile here, a soft laugh there, the way his hand would sometimes brush mine as if by accident. None of it was explicit, yet all of it carried weight. It left me questioning what would happen if one of us stopped pretending and simply spoke the truth. And then, there were moments of near confession. Like the time he lingered in the hallway after saying goodnight, his hand resting on the doorframe, his eyes locked on mine longer than they should have. Or when he offered to help with chores, standing so close I could feel the warmth of his breath, though neither of us moved away. It's a strange place to be, caught between wanting to protect what's safe and wanting to explore what feels undeniable. Each day added another layer to the suspense, and I couldn't help but wonder when the breaking point would come. The tension had grown so heavy that it followed me everywhere. It wasn't just in the quiet nights anymore. It lingered in daylight, in the way his presence filled a room, in the way my heart raced when I heard his footsteps behind me. Every interaction felt charged, as if the air itself carried a secret only we could feel. One Friday evening, the house felt quieter than usual. He had insisted on cooking dinner, something he rarely did, and the effort alone made me smile. But what unsettled me wasn't the food, it was the way he moved around the kitchen, confident, almost purposeful, glancing at me as though every step was part of something larger. When we finally sat down to eat, the air between us was so thick with silence that even the sound of cutlery against plates felt amplified. At one point, he set his fork down, leaned forward, and said softly, "I feel like there's something between us that we're both pretending not to see." My heart stopped for a moment. His words were calm, but the truth in them hit harder than anything I could have prepared for. I opened my mouth to answer, but no sound came out. Instead, I just stared at him, searching for the right thing to say, yet terrified of what might follow. Later that night, the storm outside returned, heavy rain slamming against the windows, the wind howling as if echoing everything I kept buried inside. I tried to distract myself, curling up on the couch with a blanket, but before long, he joined me. He sat closer than usual, and this time, neither of us pulled away. The glow of the dim lamp cast shadows across his face, and I could see the mix of hesitation and determination in his eyes. For a moment, it felt like time froze. My heartbeat was loud in my ears, and every nerve in my body was on edge. I could sense that we were teetering on the edge of something that would change everything. His hand moved slightly, resting on the couch near mine, not quite touching, but close enough that it felt like the smallest movement could close the distance. I wanted to speak, to set boundaries, to protect us both from what might happen, but the words refused to come. Instead, the silence stretched on, and in that silence, everything unspoken grew louder. The storm outside crashed harder, as though daring us to make a choice. It was in that exact moment that I realized we couldn't keep walking this line forever. Something had to give. And whatever happened next would decide not only our future, but how we would live with the choices we had made. The storm outside seemed like a reflection of everything happening inside me. The house trembled with each crack of thunder, and yet the real trembling was in my chest. The silence between us grew unbearable, and I could see in his eyes that he was about to cross a line neither of us could ever retreat from. But before either of us could speak, before the moment could unfold, a sharp knock at the door cut through the tension. We both froze. It was late, far too late for visitors. My first thought was that maybe a neighbor needed help because of the storm. But when I opened the door, my heart sank. It was my closest friend, someone who had known me for years, standing there drenched in rain, holding an umbrella that had clearly lost the battle against the wind. She smiled weakly, explaining her power was out and she didn't want to spend the night alone. She asked if she could stay over. I welcomed her in, of course, but as she stepped inside and set her things down, I couldn't ignore the way my stepson's eyes shifted. He hid it well, but there was something in his expression, disappointment, frustration, maybe even jealousy. It was subtle, but it was there. Suddenly, what had been building all night was forced back into hiding, buried beneath polite smiles and small talk. The evening became a balancing act. My friend chatted happily, unaware of the storm brewing inside our walls that had nothing to do with the weather outside. My stepson was quiet, distant, but his silence said more than words ever could. Every time our eyes met, I felt the unspoken reminder of what almost happened, and the fact that now, with another person in the house, it couldn't. Later, when my friend went to bed in the guest room, the house fell silent again, but the moment had already been broken. I could feel the weight of his disappointment, the way his footsteps were heavier as he went up the stairs, the way he didn't look back at me. It left me wondering, had we lost our chance? Or was the universe giving us one last warning before something irreversible happened? The next morning brought no clarity, only more questions. My friend stayed for breakfast, and I tried to focus on her stories, but my stepson barely spoke. He excused himself early, claiming he had things to do, but I knew it wasn't just about errands. He was pulling back, and the sudden distance cut deeper than I expected. That's when the real twist came. Later that day, while tidying up the living room, I found something I hadn't seen before: his journal, left carelessly on the couch. I knew I shouldn't read it, but my hands betrayed me. Inside, I found words that confirmed everything I had feared and everything I had secretly wanted. His entries spoke of sleepless nights, of feelings he tried to fight, of the storm inside him that mirrored my own. And most shocking of all, he wrote about the moment at the dinner table, the words he had finally spoken aloud: "I feel like there's something between us," and how he had been waiting for me to answer. My chest tightened as I closed the journal, my hands trembling. It was no longer just suspicion, no longer just unspoken glances and lingering moments. It was real. His feelings weren't imagined. They were written, permanent, undeniable. And now the stakes were higher than ever. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't hide behind the idea that maybe I was imagining everything. The truth was there in ink, and I had to decide what to do with it. When I put his journal back on the couch, my hands were still shaking. I knew I couldn't carry the weight of those words without facing him. That night, after my friend had gone home and the house was finally quiet again, I found him sitting alone in the living room. The storm had passed, but the air between us still felt heavy, charged with everything unsaid. I sat down across from him, my voice softer than I expected. "I saw what you wrote." His head snapped up, his eyes widening, and for a moment, I thought he might deny it. But then his shoulders dropped, and the truth spilled out in his silence before he even spoke. "I didn't mean for you to read it," he said quietly. "But I guess it doesn't matter. You know now." The confession hung in the air like a final card on the table. My heart pounded as I admitted I've felt it too. I've been trying to ignore it, trying to pretend it wasn't real. But it is. And it scares me. His expression softened, relief and fear mixing together. "I wasn't imagining it then," he whispered. "You feel it too." For the first time, everything was laid bare. No more pretending, no more careful steps around the truth. The intensity of the moment pulled us closer, as if the months of tension had finally come crashing together. I thought that was it, that this was where the line would finally be crossed, where everything we'd held back would break free. But then, just as the weight of the moment pressed hardest, a new truth surfaced. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine, and said something I never saw coming. "I wasn't just drawn to you because of the loneliness or the quiet. It's more than that. I've known for a long time, even before that night. I think I've always been waiting for this moment." His words stunned me. It wasn't sudden for him, it wasn't just about the storm, or the nights of silence, or even that dinner conversation. This had been building inside him for years, long before I ever admitted it to myself. That realization shifted everything. It wasn't just a spark, it was a fire that had been smoldering, patient, and unrelenting. I sat back, trying to catch my breath, realizing how deep we had already fallen without even touching. The resolution wasn't in choosing whether we felt it, because we both knew we did. The real decision was what to do with it now, knowing there was no turning back. And just when I thought the night had revealed everything, the unexpected twist came. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key, placing it on the table. "I was going to give this to you tomorrow," he said. "It's to a cabin outside the city. I thought maybe we could go away for a while. Just the two of us. No one watching, no one judging." The key glimmered in the lamplight, a symbol of both freedom and danger. My heart raced as I stared at it, knowing this choice wasn't just about us anymore. It was about the life we would leave behind, the secrets we would carry, and the path we might not be able to return from. The little key on the table seemed to glow under the soft light, and for a long moment neither of us moved. My heart was torn between fear and longing, between the life I knew and the one waiting just outside the edge of what was safe. He waited patiently, his eyes steady, giving me space to choose. It wasn't about rushing into something reckless, it was about acknowledging the truth we had both been running from. I picked up the key, turning it over in my hand. Its weight was heavier than I expected, almost as if it carried every unanswered question between us. "If we do this," I said slowly, "we have to be honest with ourselves about what it means. No hiding, no regrets. Are you ready for that?" He nodded, the certainty in his voice stronger than ever. "I've been ready. I just didn't know if you were." And in that moment, I realized I was. Not because the choice was easy, but because pretending any longer would have been harder. So we agreed to take that step together, quietly, carefully, knowing the world outside didn't need to understand. What mattered was the connection we had found, one that had grown in silence and now demanded to be acknowledged. The next weekend, we drove out to the cabin. The air there was different, lighter, freer, untouched by the judgment of neighbors or the eyes of people who would never know the full story. We didn't need to rush into anything. Just being there, away from the noise, was enough. We spent hours talking, finally saying everything that had been left unsaid. For the first time, there were no walls between us, no secrets, no pretense. Looking back, I know the journey was complicated. It wasn't just about romance or desire, it was about two people finding comfort, healing, and honesty in each other when they needed it most. The conflict wasn't whether feelings existed, but whether we had the courage to face them. And in the end, the truth gave us both something we had been searching for: connection without shame, love without denial. Life moved forward after that. There were still challenges, still moments of doubt, but the key takeaway was clear: love doesn't always follow rules, and sometimes the most meaningful relationships are the ones that surprise you. What matters is how you choose to handle them, with honesty, responsibility, and the willingness to face whatever comes next. So, what do you think? Did I make the right choice by taking the key, or should I have walked away before crossing that line? Would you want to see a sequel where we explore what happened at the cabin and beyond? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And don't forget, your reflections might shape the next story we tell together. Summary: this story follows an unexpected journey of connection, trust, and unspoken emotions between two people under one roof. What begins as quiet tension slowly unfolds into a powerful romance filled with suspense, conflict, and life-changing choices. When faced with a symbolic key to a new beginning, the main character must decide between the safety of old boundaries and the risk of a future built on truth. 1.